Hello, this is Nordic Nugz Music Reviews. Welcome to my rebranded channel. This is my first ever attempt at reviewing an album, at least recording it and putting it up. So it'll be a learning experience for me. I'm starting off with a short 5-episode series of like my top 5 favorite albums, and I'll branch out from that point if I'm really enjoying this or not. And just to specify, this is not a first-time reactions, and it's not like a full listen through. I've listened through this album, and I've made notes on parts I want to emphasize and talk about. And also, I'll be cutting through this album. So if you want to listen to it, please go find this album on any of your favorite listening places, streaming platforms. And yeah, and just to give a quick apology, in my room, the AC is actually in my room, like just behind these doors here. So at some point in time, it's going to turn on. I'm not going to let it stop me from doing this video. So if you hear like a low rumble in the background, that's it. There's nothing I can do about it. And so we're going to go straight into this this album. This is an album called Sleep at the Edge of the Earth by Wilderun. I believe it is their second album in their discography, and they've released 2 more albums since this, but this is still by far my favorite album of theirs. And let's go straight into the first song. So this first song is called Dust and Crooked Thoughts. It is essentially the intro song to the album. And the song starts off with some really nice Foley, like a Foley soundtrack almost, with like a running river and some bird sounds. And then it comes in with this really nice acoustic guitar. And the acoustic guitar tone is really nice. This whole album is really well recorded, and it builds very nicely with other layered acoustic instruments that come into it. So we're going to play a little bit of the first of this here. That is not the correct song. All right. So it builds really nicely with all of these other acoustic instruments coming in. I believe there's a hammer dulcimer playing in there. There's also a mandolin in there. And I believe you can hear a banjo in there, which is actually really nice to hear a banjo just doing like single note melodic leads instead of just like in like bluegrass stuff that banjos are usually a part of. So it's really refreshing to see a banjo used in this kind of a way. So a little bit further on into the song, the like acoustic portion of this kind of dies down, or at least this this build that's already going on kind of dies down. It goes into this really nice duet between acoustic guitar and banjo, which is really cool. Crescendos in with these really cool vocals and this really nice dynamic build. You can kind of hear that the banjo is like they're both the banjo and the acoustic are playing rhythmic portions, but the banjo's kind of doing this melody on top of it, which is really cool, because usually the guitar gets like the melody portion of something. And so this whole thing builds into this nice crescendo of all of these acoustic instruments and the vocals. And the dynamics in this album are top notch. Just absolutely amazing dynamics all throughout. And so this is kind of a real taste of what you're going to get through some of this. And so on to the second song. This song is called And So Opens the Earth. It's also, in parentheses, it says Ash Memory Part 1. And this song has, the next 3 songs are called Ash Memory Part 1, 2, 3. Actually, I guess the next 4 songs. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So these are all kind of in some kind of thematic thing that goes along between all 4 of these parts, which is really interesting. I've never really seen that before in an album. But this song starts off, And So Opens the Earth, starts off with this really nice acoustic rhythm, and then the distortion comes in with the symphonic components and just builds really nice on that theme. So we'll listen to a piece of this. That was a really cool part. There's so many really intricate little pieces just dribbled throughout all of these songs on this album. So this next little bit here, you finally get to hear like the lead guitar come in, playing a melody that syncs up really nicely with all of the symphonic components. And this is a really good taste of the type of leads, melodic guitar leads that are going to be in this album. I'll play a section of it for you. Awesome. So right here, you get to see like this really interesting little bit where the lead guitar will descend, and then the rhythm guitar kind of follows into a descension, like a double descending little bit, like immediately after. It's a really cool bit of arrangement. So you hear the da-na-na-na, like that, the lead guitar do that little descending thing, and then the rhythm guitar, you have to pay really close attention, but you can hear it go da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like right there at the end. It's so cool. Oh, it's awesome. So right here is where the vocals come in for the first time on this album, and underneath it is this really awesome mix of distorted rhythm guitar and acoustic rhythm guitar, just blended together so seamlessly, and it's a really cool sound. And also, like I said, this is where the lyrics come in, and awesome lyrics from Evan Barry in this album, like a really smooth, creamy, clean vocals is really awesome. Let's play a section of it. After years of hiding in the dark, a sound is heard and the shadows pull apart. Just a whisper, just a fading song. I guess actually you can hear that there's some. Oh, what is it called? I think there's some mandolin in there too, at least on the second part.
2 years of hiding, a sound is heard.
Oh yeah, so there's the distorted guitar, there's the acoustic guitar, and then there's some mandolin in there. I believe that's mandolin that's playing right there, which is really just tucked away, and
The shadow is pulled apart.
which I think is awesome that you can listen to these parts. I've probably listened to this album 20 times, and you just hear these little things that are like, I guess that's there, and I never fucking noticed it. So right here, the melody theme comes back in with the lyrics underneath it, and it all blends really well with the orchestrated section, and you can hear everything in this mix, and the mix is so just super on point right here. And after a little bit, it goes into this section with this really nice orchestration, like the like symphonic orchestration. And there's this double bass going on with the cymbals just going, and it's almost like a really smooth, fluid blast beat. I know it's not a blast beat, but it really kind of seems like that feeling underneath all of this, and it's awesome to see such such busy work on the drums just feels so fluid and not really that harsh. It's a really awesome little section. So we are on to the third song on the album, Hope and Shadow, or Ash Memory Part 2. And this song comes in, first of all, it fades from the last song, and it comes in with this acoustic guitar, and this cello comes in accompanying it, which is a really awesome, soothing mix. Acoustic guitar and cello are always like a smash hit together. And then there's these little slight piano just accents that happen in like just underneath all of this, and it's really an awesome little section. That cello, then a piano accent right here. Just such a beautiful little bit right there. And right there, the lyrics come in, maintaining the same melodic melody as, I believe, the song before it. And this is something you're going to see a lot in this album, where they bring back themes from other parts of the album. And I feel like they do this in order to maintain. So when you're writing music to tell a story, oftentimes the composer will have certain thematic things will have the same musical themes to show that this is the same theme as before in whatever medium you're listening to. So this happens a lot, and that's what leads me to believe that this whole album is one long story of some sorts, almost like a children's tale or something like that, just because of how often there are themes that reoccur in songs, and it's something I really actually like to hear in an album, because it shows it's not just a bunch of riffs thrown together. It is, they put some real time and thought into deciding where these melodies come back into the song and when, and what these melodies or these melodic themes are supposed to mean to the story.
As I venture where the sound has led, I rest my bones on the frosty earthen bed. It numbs my eyes so I won't have to know I've not the strength to survive where you go.
And right here, I believe, yes, right about here, there's a slide guitar that comes in, and it really picks the whole song up and starts to feel like this almost folk country western adventure feeling. Not really country western in like actual musical genre, but it just has this feeling of like you're kind of starting to go on this adventure with the main character, whoever this main character is. More hammer dulcimer playing right there. And then some vocals coming in underneath. And right here in this next part, you hear this low tom kind of roll that leads right into this reoccurring melodic theme that starts to build with vocal melodies and different instruments scattered throughout this little bit, and it really builds into this heroic, heavy music before fading out.
Please look beyond me as you hang underneath.
Every instrument gets a little bit of space right here to play this melodic theme. Back into the slide guitar right there. And I believe it goes... really awesome little bit to have just that distorted guitar come in and just be a powerhouse for the overall feeling of like heroicness in that. So on to the next song. It's called the Bite the Wound. Is that what it's called? Yeah, it's called Bite the Wound. It's called also known as Ash Memory Part 3. And this song starts off with pretty heavy with orchestra and building distorted guitar, and this brass section brings like this kind of impending doom feeling. You can hear that like men's choir in the background chanting. And it just goes really fucking hard right there, which I think is just so cool. So this in this song there is I believe it's a chorus, and the first chorus has this like kind of clean, distant vocals, and then the second time the chorus comes back, it is these harsh guttural vocals, which I think is really cool. So here's the first this first chorus.
Stone
And it goes into this really awesome solo right here that seems almost like it was written chromatically. And you can hear it like rise and fall, but it seems to not have any direction. And chromatic stuff is really awesome in music because it's meant to make it seem like there's no direction. So you kind of feel lost in a chromatic part. And it's not used very often in music, but when they do use it and you use it correctly, has this really cool feeling of just being absolutely lost. So listen to this solo, and this is probably one of the only like really like shredding type of solos in the whole album. Absolutely awesome. And this next chorus comes in. I just want to kind of show it. So cool stuff like that, where the first, I believe it's a chorus, is like a different vocal style than the second time the chorus comes around. I think is just super interesting. So this next little bit is a lead that comes in with a high gain distorted guitar, and I believe it's probably using like a bridge pickup. And there is this acoustic accompaniment that is following along. And what I really like about this is the melody is not entirely predictable. It really travels through ascending and descending stuff, which I think is always really interesting to listen to. It's almost like it's almost kind of in the same vein of a walking bass line where it just kind of goes where it needs to. And I believe it's a mandolin that's playing along with it, which makes it's just really impressive mixing that you can hear like an acoustic instrument like that cutting through the mix so well and being so apparent in there. And then eventually the lead vocals come back in. I'll just play you a little bit of this. And that's where that vocals come back in. And right at this point, there is this lyric, which I'll read to you, which I think is just really interesting. It says, "A dying beast crawls beside my feet, begging for the end, for one last final sleep, but I can only stare and watch as it suffers. Truth lies in the sharp edge of my blade, but if I strike, the image of the Savior fades, and your memory of me becomes a name," which I think may seem to suggest the protagonist or the hero that we're following. Maybe it seems to suggest that they are some kind of like hero or savior. However, he can't truly take away the pain of the creatures around him, so to speak. And unless his deeds become meaningless, so to speak. And it almost seems to suggest there's that AC that goes off. It's almost like he wants his deeds to speak louder than his name does. And he doesn't seek like the fame of his name. He wants to have a better future, maybe. The lyrics in this album are really quite obscure, at least to me, and so I think it's one of those albums where everyone takes what they want to get away from it. But I picture this album being more of like a kind of adventure, almost, of someone who's going on this quest to do something to help something or something along those lines. It's a really interesting lyric that provokes a lot of thought from it. And so we're moving on to the next song, the fifth song of the album, The Faintest Echo, or called Ash Memory Part 4. There's not a whole lot of lyrics to this song. and this song starts off coming back with the lead harking back to the vocal melody of "And So Opens the Earth," and it's we'll play a second of it. So right at this mark, the music comes back into the theme that started the Ash Memory like little series in the album, and it has this like soaring vocals, and I feel like maybe this is to suggest that this is the end of the memory portion of the album, because after this point it gets quite different. And so yeah, let's just listen to this a little bit.
The end.
Additional orchestration on top of it. And so the rest of this little bit goes into this wonderful musical composition that feels almost like a journey in and of itself, and we're kind of sharing this journey with the protagonist, whatever that may be. But at around 2 minutes in, the song fades out and almost seems to fade into a different song entirely. And in fact, if I weren't looking at the track listing right now, I would say it's a totally different song, because it just feels that way. And there's these quick little piano accents and leading melody in the background, which I think is super, super cool. Let's get to once again, more hammer, dulcimer. So there's this little bit in getting towards the end of the song where these guitar leads come in that are so emotional. At least I feel them like deep in my soul, and it seems to feel like stress and difficulty of a long journey ahead of the protagonist as they go along. And this is like pinnacle of amazing lead guitar parts that come out of this album. And so we're moving on to the next song, the 6th song in the album. This song is called The Garden of Fire. We're officially out of the Ash Memory songs. And this song is, like I said, the last song seems to tell you through emoting through the music that it was the last song of the memory. And now we're on to just a totally different, these next few songs are just kind of totally different than everything else. And the song starts off with this awesome drum fill into some really heavy guitar parts, and I absolutely love how it starts. And I think this song is meant to be the single off of the album, even though I kind of feel like none of these songs really should stand alone for the most part. And it is by far my favorite song on the album if I had to choose one. So let's listen to the intro of this. And so it has this, like, I really like how this this album has a lot of like really cool death metal inspirations, but also there's little bits of like kind of black metal-ish inspirations in there. Like I could totally see how that like that's just kind of like a really, it's kind of like a little bit of a black metal part right there, which is super cool. Now there's a part right here that is this kind of call and response where the vocals will say something, and then there's this like dark vocal choir that responds back. And to me, it's like really similar to like the chanting of an army in response to like the general or something like that.
Countless years have come and gone, and still we dig into the ocean's skin. On fire, skies collapse with this, and still we fly. The skies.
Awesome little piece. Now in this part right here, there's this really interesting string melody that's playing underneath the rhythm guitar that almost feels like pure tension, and it builds a little bit on the second half with another instrument that comes in, but you can kind of hear like like this little thing in the little, just deep in the background. You really have to pay attention. Now this part you can kind of hear that it's it has a higher string piece over the top of it, so you can hear it a little bit better in the second portion. Dun, 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 dun. It's really awesome, just ear candy underneath. That's so cool. So right here, the song goes into this great composition of like a metal and symphonic elements, but just a little bit after that, the orchestra does this like really beautiful resolve, and another instrument kind of responds to the resolve with like an accenting melody. And this is the kind of like music shit that I nerd out to so hard. Listen to it. Resolve right here. I love that little bit right there, because it's like the orchestra resolves, and then that little, I think it's a mandolin, is just mandolin or hammer dulcimer is like bum 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 bum, and I'm like, it's so juicy, so juicy. So there's another interesting lyric that is right here. It reads, "I could live forever, I could dream forever in the garden of fire. I've grown so tired, but I could fight forever and battle any weather in the garden of fire." And it's right here that I start to wonder, what is the garden of fire supposed to be? Kind of like an afterlife that calls to him, or perhaps it could, maybe if he gives up on his quest, he could live in comfort and ease in this garden of fire. I'm not exactly sure what it's supposed to be, but it invokes a lot of thought, and yeah, it's really interesting. So right here is my favorite portion of the song, and it kind of all dies down into this vocal melody with some underlying accompaniment with it, and you hear this vocal melody singing, and at a certain point right after, there's this like tom drum fill that pushes into a leading note that leads into the same vocal melody on guitar, and it's absolutely, in my opinion, it's one of the best parts of this. It's my personal favorite part of the entire album, and then it plays this little melody, and then it like kind of travels off into like a little bit of a solo thing and then comes back in with the vocal melody, and it all plays together with this really awesome orchestration playing underneath it. And it's absolutely a beautiful, and it just gets my heart pumping every time I listen to it. And we're gonna listen to this whole little bit.
Surrender to the fading sun. We'll wake and we'll find intention and action are one. So don't despair if you can't find your mind. For tonight we drink together from the goblets of time.
Oh, so good. So good. That like minute and a half right there is, oh my God, I can listen to that over and over. You just saw how excited I was to listen to that. And I've listened to this album literally 20 times. And it's every time it gets me going so hard. It's awesome. And there's a lyric right there that I think is really interesting too. For now we will surrender to the fading sun. We'll wake and we will find intention and action are one, which I think is really interesting because it's trying to say that you can't just have good intentions and you can't just have good actions. You need to have both of them together in order to truly do a good thing, which I think calls back to one of the other lyrics I talked about where the animal comes up and wants him to kind of end his life. And he said, I feel your pain. My intentions are good, but I can't act on that. And it's kind of saying like, well, it doesn't really matter anymore because you had good intentions, but you didn't have good actions. And so it's like all of the thoughts before are kind of moot now because you weren't using your actions and intentions together at the same time, which I think is a really interesting thing and has a lot of significance in today's day and age where people are, I mean, I don't want to get too political, but like there's a lot of talk about like whether your intentions were good or whether you had good actions, but it's just a really awesome lyric that is kind of hidden away. Like you wouldn't really, unless you really took the time to think a little bit more about the lyric, it probably wouldn't come up. So we're going to move on to the 7th song, Linger. Linger comes in with this acoustic guitar and this slight piano. You hear this like really slight piano accent in there before bass comes in with what I think is possibly the only like what you could kind of consider like a bass solo in here. There's not a lot of portions where bass is soloed out or has its own time to shine. And I think this is one of the only times in the song you get that. And I'm pretty sure it's a fretless bass. And then you can see where it comes back in with that sliding guitar theme that we've heard before in the album. So overall, this song has just more really awesome acoustic parts, and the first half of the song is really like a slower, more acoustic song with clean vocals, really soft, clean vocals, and then it hits this like really hard, triumphant sounding portion. I'm gonna skip through most of that. Like I said, get this album and listen to the whole thing multiple times. But there's this part at about 5 minutes 30 seconds where the music starts to fade out, and it comes in with this kind of low driving tom, like drum and cymbal work that goes along with like orchestra. You can hear it like building and fading, and there's little portions where like it builds and then hits a crash cymbal, and then it's like low again and it has to build back up. Just really awesome dynamics through this section. Almost like war drums in a sense. And I really love when like you'll build up and hit like a heavy note, and then suddenly it's like da, 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 like it's crescendos really well and hits a heavy note, and then all of a sudden it's like cuts off back down to being really low again, which is super cool. And this part goes on for quite a bit with the orchestrations exploring the space before it fades out into this like droning guitar part that goes to the next song. Which is just super awesome, and that goes into the next song. And so we're going to move on to the next song, the 8th song of the 9 on the album. This song is called The Means to Preserve, and like I said, it fades from the droning from the last song, comes into this song, and the droning actually fades out. The droning doesn't really do anything other than to fade from one song to the other, but it comes in with some acoustic guitar and clean vocals, but it really quickly kind of switches to distorted guitar and like chanting choir.
Glow is not hard to miss when washed up against the abyss.
Really awesome. So this next little bit I'm going to talk about is this portion with really awesome orchestration, and you can kind of start to hear, obviously there's the strings and the brass playing underneath, but there starts to come in with some, I think they're like woodwinds or something. I think it's like kind of flute or something like that, which is not exactly sure, but it's a really well arranged orchestration through all of these things, and it eventually fades out back into that droning that started the song with a acoustic lead that mimics like the clean parts that came before it. It's really, really well done. It's really cool sounding, and obviously there's a build there that builds into the next part, but I'm gonna move on. So right here, there's a lyric that says, "Await no fate, too late, too late." And on that first "too late," so the "await no fate" lyric has this like double bass thing that's going on, and then on the "too late" portion, it switches to a blast beat, which I think is just super cool, like dynamic drum writing. And then that second "too late" that happens is just this different kind of drum, kind of a tom fill thing that's happening underneath it. But it's just a really cool dynamic like drum writing that I think is just so interesting and really accentuates that lyric by itself. So there's this lyric right here that I want to read. It says, "So bring me the shield, not the sword. Bring me a coward's last reward. 'Cause if you grant me the power to fight this battle, I will keep begging you for more." And it kind of seems to suggest that the protagonist understands that he can't accept too much power and only the power to protect what he kind of holds dear, maybe, and maybe nothing more. Asking for the shield and not the sword. So I don't know, like, if it's just like a moment of understanding for him that he's essentially trying to get somewhere that could possibly be addicting for someone, for people of like lesser will, so to speak. Really interesting lyric right there that I really love. So there's this little part in this song, and I was paying so close attention to as much of these songs as you can possibly pay attention to in one listen through, and I actually found a little tiny mistake where there's like a little cutting error almost, and I was gonna point it out and be like, oh, it's right here, like right this little bit, but I decided I don't think it's worth pointing it out. If you happen to hear it, awesome. I just think it's really interesting to hear that, I mean, I kind of have this opinion that no art is ever perfect. And there's probably so much in this album that the artists are like, yeah, that part's not awesome, that part's not awesome. But I also think that you shouldn't be the one to point out the imperfections of art even still. So I'm going to kind of just graze over that, even though it's kind of a little Easter egg for me now when I listen to it. It's like, yeah, there's that little bit. Cool. Anyways, I'm going to graze over it because I don't think it's really, in order to enjoy the album, probably 99% of people that have listened to this have never noticed it. So I'm not going to be the one to point it out. I just think it's really interesting. So right here, there's this really well done guitar, finger picking guitar portion, and I really love how the guitarist, I assume it's Evan Barry playing this part, but just the parts where he like does little inflections in it, and the way he transitions from one chord to another is just really well done. And finger picking on an acoustic guitar, like if you're just the type that just finger picks like casually, it's not that hard, but doing like intricate stuff in the finger picking, it takes so much work to try and get that just right. And I want to play a little bit of it to just show how awesome this little bit is. And I kind of have an idea of possibly like the amount of time it took to get this little bit down really well.
Hide while you can, they will see.
So there's like this little hammer on and pull off, and then the slide down and then back up. That's just a really, it's just a glorious little bit of acoustic guitar playing.
Hide while you can, they will see you. Those with the wounds in the flesh,
little bit of a major. So right here, once again, we go back into an acoustic melody theme that has like some variation to it with different instruments. Right here. And this verse that comes up right here is one of my favorite lyrical verses in the entire song. And there's this orchestration and arrangement that builds up dynamically with the lyrics. And all the while, the lyrics are kind of talking about how perhaps you didn't need to ask for the power to protect, and rather you had this power inside of you all along, and you just had to kind of find it on your own. It's really a beautiful little bit, and I just want to play it and have you guys listen to it.
Maybe you'll find the strength after all. Maybe we're not destined for the fall. All I ever saw deep in the mirror of your eyes was a candle lit just to fight the cold, and a child born to forget the old. But I swore to you I wouldn't live that way. Let the pieces fall when they may.
And this next little bit, this next verse is this like harrowing death metal verse with harsh vocals and really heavy guitar. But there's this brass that slowly fades into the background, building the whole thing up even more than the guitars alone could. And it's just so cool. And you almost can't even tell unless you're really paying attention to that brass that comes in right there. And it follows the little distorted guitar melody right there. So it blends in so well with that guitar melody that it's almost impossible to hear it unless you're really paying attention to it. But it's super cool right there. So right here at this portion of the song, about 8 minutes and 30 seconds in, there's this huge grand resolution that actually reveals the title of the album for the first time in the album. And it's just this huge wall of sound with all of the instruments playing together. And what I really want to point out is, regardless of how heavy this part is, all of the instruments can be heard very clearly, which is awesome. Just really awesome mixing going on right here. And every instrument has its little space that you can just hear it so clearly.
I'll take my voice, sing at the edge of the earth.
absolutely an amazing part of this song and of this album. So this next little bit I want to talk about, there's this dissonant chord that comes in, and the chord just keeps going, droning on and on. It almost seems like it's building intensity, but I think I can tell that it's not actually changing in dynamic at all, but it feels that way. And it might be because of what's happening around the chord with the other instruments. But eventually this chord just kind of drops off, and there's this like piano, the piano that will eventually fade into the next song comes in, which is really cool. And I think you can actually hear an ebow playing right there, this like droning note that's just like over the top of that, which I just barely noticed. Okay, so the song actually switches before that piano comes in. But that's either an ebow playing right there, or it's they just hit some feedback harmonic and they're just sitting there and letting it like ring out for that entire thing, which is a super cool way to end a song in my opinion. Like it almost seems like it builds. Maybe it I know it doesn't build in any kind of way dynamically other than like that ebow or feedback coming in or something, but maybe it's just like your own mind thinking it's building because it's going on for such a long time, which is really interesting. So there's this interesting lyric at the end of this song that says, "After the years spent in here, I'm still not in the clear. The realization draws near that all we will ever know is fear." And something about this song seems to suggest the realization that the protagonist has to become maybe the antagonist in order to keep whatever the darkness at bay is that he's trying to stop. Maybe, I'm not exactly sure. Perhaps it's the idea that you become what you end up fighting in the process of doing so. Or perhaps it's like maybe in like a more literal sense, it's a non-linear time scale where perhaps the darkness escapes because he was no longer there to keep it at bay or to be the darkness. I'm not exactly sure. It's like I said, the lyrics in this album are really obscure to me, I feel, and I'm kind of left to my imagination to come up with something that I feel fits the lyrics, which I don't necessarily think is like bad lyric writing. Like, not every lyric needs to be matter of fact and very plainly spelled out for you to understand, right? Such as like Holy Diver, unless I've never looked up the meaning for Holy Diver by Dio, but there's no way to tell what that song actually is about, probably unless you look it up or you're a smarter person than I am at figuring out lyrics and stuff. So it's just a really interesting it's really interesting reading the lyrics through all of this and trying to figure out maybe what the story is behind all of that. And I may be hitting it. I may also be missing the mark, but also I kind of feel like it's the kind of thing that's left up to the interpreter to figure out. So we finally come to the last song on the album, "Sleep at the Edge of the Earth," which is the title track of the song or of the album. This song is an instrumental, which just means more room for beautiful instrumental pieces, you know? So this song starts off with a really beautiful piano piece after the heavy dissonance of the last song. And for the first time, I think, in the album, we hear flute in the background, and this cello joins in. Strings, there are strings that come in and with an accompaniment melody. It's actually relatively major compared to what the piano, flute, and cello mix is doing, which I think is really interesting. So we'll go right into it. Actually, I think that may be because in the list of instruments and who played what instrument, there's a melodica in there, which, for those of you who don't know, is like the little electric keyboard, and it has this little hose that goes into your mouth and you blow it. I don't exactly know how it works, but it's kind of an interesting instrument, and I wonder if that may be the melodica. I'm not exactly sure, but there's that kind of majory feeling. And it swells a little bit. And that continues to go swelling for a little bit longer, and as it kind of builds in dynamics. But at a certain point, choir joins in when the song shifts directions. Right here. Nice little like piano chord, like all the notes played individually in the chord. And at a certain point, all of the accompaniment falls out, leaving just the piano, with one last very tiny swell from like the higher strings portion, like just a really tiny swell, and that leaves the piano to resolve with its final chord, which I think is just a beautiful way to end this album. Such an amazing way to end this song. And there was a part in here that I like just barely I noticed this just like a little bit ago. So there's this right there. There's this tiny the piano plays a thing, and there's this ever so slight little note, but and it just the piano plays, and there's this da da like that just follows along, and it's such an intimate little note that's right there. I don't know if you heard it. There'll be the chord, and then there's this and there's this da da like tiny little intimate note. It's so good. Like, the album is just riddled with those tiny little nuances that if you're just listening to it on your way home from work, or like you're doing something in the background, cleaning, or like working on an art project, you'd never hear these kind of just little tiny nuggets of sound that are just dotted all over the place. And it's not until you put on a pair of headphones and sit down and really listen to this album that you're gonna find little things like that. And I almost feel like they're just little tiny Easter egg gifts from the artists, like to show their appreciation to the people who are really listening to this album. And I love stuff like that. Anyways, that is the last song on the album. And I suppose now I'm going to kind of do like an overall final thoughts on the album, I suppose. So this has been Sleep at the Edge of the Earth by Wilderun, and I'm going to kind of give my final thoughts and opinions about the album. I see this album as being kind of the musical equivalent to The Lord of the Rings, and that is in terms of like grandiosity and the journey that it goes on. This album follows the typical A-B song structure very infrequently, which means it allows for it to be very creative in the way that it emphasizes different sections and adds variety to similar sections in different parts of the song, and also in the way it transitions from one part to the next. Like I kind of said a little bit in my tangent at the end of the last song, this album really rewards those people who listen closely and are listening really carefully. Every time you listen to this, to it, if you're listening closely, you will hear something you did not hear before. And even just now going through and actually filming this, I would be like, oh, okay, here's this little section, and I play it. And then I'd hear something I had never heard before. It's like, oh my God, there's this little bit of orchestration over this part that I had never known about. You'll start to notice instruments where you hadn't before, orchestrations tucked away underneath every portion. Underneath like these heavy portions of metal. And the arrangements lead you through a journey. In my opinion, I feel like I'm going on a journey through this whole song. The orchestrations are grand and intricate, and the dynamics run the gamut of emotions throughout the entire thing. So the guitar work in the album is incredible. Granted, it doesn't have like a ton of like shredding solos, which I don't think is a disservice to the album at all. It's not really that big of a deal. But if you're the type of person that likes to listen to an album and hears like these incredible shredding solos, you're not really going to find it in this album. And in fact, the solos that this album have is actually relatively infrequent, other than the really awesome like lead melodies that it has playing throughout. It's all played with such like so much force and so much verve that they catch you and they really move you, and you kind of really feel like you're feeling the emotion that the guitarist wanted you to feel through it. And I think that is, in my opinion, you can sit and shred on a guitar all you want, and it's awesome. It's technically really rad that you can do that, but if you can get me with a guitar lead that's not necessarily technical but has an emotion that grabs me and pulls me with it, in my opinion, that's the most impressive thing anyone can do on a guitar. And I'm not gonna lie, no joke, the first time I heard the Garden of Fire, that little lead slash guitar solo at the end that we had listened to, I nearly cried when I first heard that. It was so powerful to me. I absolutely love it. So the distorted guitar tones are incredibly clean with high fidelity. Possibly one of my favorite guitar tones I've ever listened to in an album in a long while. I have a few albums that I'm like, this guitar tone is so awesome, and this guitar tone is so awesome. This album, the guitar tones in this album, is part of that list of incredible guitar tones. And I personally would really like to know how they achieved it. If anyone who's worked on this album watches this and you want to like email me or message me or post down in the comments how you managed to get some of these distorted guitar tones, I would love to know how you got these. And the mixing in this album is super well done. You can always hear all of the instruments playing each part in if you're paying close enough attention. Every little instrument has its own space that it occupies and doesn't really clash very much with any other instrument. And so in closing, I've listened to this album multiple times, like I said before. However, sitting down to actively listen to it for the purpose of this review has possibly been one of the most rewarding experiences when it comes to trying to take in a piece of music. If you really take it to heart, this is the type of album that can change you, that can change you and make you consider what good songwriting really is, and push you to up your own game at being a creative musician or artist, if you are in fact one of those, a musician or an artist of some type. This is the type of album that can show you that you can step off the beaten path, and it can be incredibly rewarding, and you can make something that is absolutely beautiful, and you don't need to follow the common trends that everyone else says you need to follow. So anyways, that is my review, my very first review on the channel. That is my review of Wilderun, the band Wilderun, and their album Sleep at the Edge of the Earth. I hope you really enjoyed the review. I had a fun time sitting down, listening to the album, writing this kind of script that I was going through, and especially filming and recording this. It's all been kind of a new experience for me, and so I had a fun time. I hope you guys had a fun time, and there's gonna be at least 4 more that I'm gonna do, I think, before I start releasing any of these. And so I hope you stick around for the other ones, and if you have any suggestions on albums you'd like me to review, leave a comment down below. Let me know. I can't promise if I get a lot of suggestions, I can't promise I'll get to all of them. But I'm trying to have a really open mind about any type of music. And so this channel isn't necessarily going to be, even though I started off with this kind of experimental folk metal album, the whole channel is not going to be based around that. It's going to be really anything that anyone suggests to me, I will listen to. One of my mottos for music is every piece of music deserves to be listened to at least once, but you do not have to like all of them. So anyways, yeah, I'm kind of going going with that mantra, and anything that anyone suggests to me, I will put it on a list and try to get around to a lot of them. And we'll see how far I get before I maybe burn out or run out of steam. I'm not sure. So anyways, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to this. Once again, go out and find this album on wherever you like to listen to. It's not on Bandcamp anymore. But go out and try and find this album and listen to it, and listen to it multiple times, because you will, if you're the type of person that likes to listen to an album and find stuff, you will never be disappointed in this album. Anyways, great. Thank you for coming, and have a great day.